In this video we look at the tubular peyote stitch, which can be used for chunky ropes and bracelets. Stay with me and I'll show you how. We begin by threading a needle with about an arm span of thread, and we pick up an even number of beads. I've picked up 10. We slide those beads down to the end of our thread, keeping hold of the tail so they don't fall off, and we sew back up through the first bead, making a ring. Now the first few rows of this are going to be very awkward, so to help this keep its shape, I'm going to place my ring over the end of a crochet hook. You can also use a pen or a knitting needle, anything remotely stick-shaped. And keeping hold of the tail, we pick up a bead, and we're coming out of this bead, and we skip over the next, and sew through the one after it. We pull both working thread and tail thread tight. We pick up a bead, we skip over the next bead, and sew through the one after it. Again, pulling our threads tight. Pick up a bead, we skip over the next bead, and sew through the one after it. Pick up a bead, skip over the next one, and sew through the one after it. Pick up a bead, skip over the next bead, and we've reached the end of our round, so we sew through the next bead and up diagonally through the bead next to it. Now we have the first few rows of our peyote pattern, and it will be easier from here on out. We pick up a bead, we skip the dipped bead and sew through the next sticking up bead. Pick up a bead, we skip the dipped bead and sew through the sticking up bead. Pick up a bead, we skip the dipped bead and sew through the sticking up bead. Pick up a bead, skip the dipped bead and sew through the sticking up bead. Pick up a bead, and we're at the end of the round, so we sew through the next sticking up bead and up diagonally through the one next to it. We pick up a bead, skip the dipped bead and sew through the sticking up bead. Pick up a bead, skip the dipped bead and sew through the next sticking up bead. We pick up a bead, we sew through the next sticking up bead. We pick up a bead, sew through the next sticking up bead. And we're at the end of the round, so we pick up a bead, we sew through the next sticking up bead, and we step up diagonally through the bead next to it. Now we can remove our stick because we've done enough rows that it will keep its shape and we can keep hold of our work. And we carry on along the rounds making our peyote stitch by picking up a bead, skipping over the dipped bead and sewing through the sticking up bead. Carry on all the way along the round. And when you reach the end of the round, we step up by sewing through the next sticking up bead and up diagonally through the bead next to it. Carry on adding more rows until you reach your desired length. Let's assume we've made our piece long enough to make a bangle, and we want to join our ends together. We bring our two ends together, making sure our work isn't twisted. We have our thread coming out of a sticking up bead on one side, and we sew across to the other side into the sticking up bead, and then back down to the first side into the next sticking up bead. We then sew into the next sticking up bead on the second side, then across to the next sticking up bead on the first side, then across to the next sticking up bead on the second side. And we carry on working back and forth into the sticking up beads on each side, pulling the two ends together much like a zip. With both ends joined together, we will want to tie off our thread. We place our needle under a thread that's coming between two beads, and we pull through until we make a loop. We pass our needle through the loop twice, and then we pull the thread tight, making a surgeon's knot. We then pass our needle through the next bead, pulling the knot inside. We bring our needle under a thread between two beads, and we make a loop. We pass our needle through the loop twice, and we pull it tight, and sew through the next bead. Carry on moving around your work, tying surgeon's knots until you're satisfied that your work is secure. I usually find 3 or 4 knots to be ample. We can then snip off our thread, and we're done. And that's how to do the tubular peyote stitch.